the clang of steel, the roar of cannon, a city's last breath echoing through shattered stone. Stripped of his crown, he fought as a common soldier, a final, defiant stand for a fading empire. The conqueror rides through silence, a profound victory. A new dawn breaks, but at what immeasurable cost? This isn't just a city's fall, my friend. This is the quiet, final whisper of something far older. We often speak of Rome's fall, a sudden collapse. But truth is, history rarely flows so cleanly. Imagine a tree, growing for centuries. Its branches wither, its leaves fall, but it still stands. Like that tree, an empire doesn't always just snap. Sometimes, it slowly, agonizingly, dies. For the Roman Empire, that slow fading took over 1,000 years. A monumental, drawn-out passing. The West collapsed, yes, but the East, Byzantium, carried the flame, a beacon against the gathering darkness. For centuries, Constantinople was Rome's heart, a city of unparalleled might, beauty, and wisdom. It was a living testament, a repository of knowledge, preserving what was lost in the West. But even the mightiest flame can flicker. The pressure on this last bastion grew year by year. Little by little, territories chipped away. The empire, once vast, became a lonely, shrinking island. The vitality waned, resources dwindled. The once bright jewel began to show the marks of immense age. Its legendary walls stood as a desperate symbol, holding back a tide that felt increasingly unstoppable. And then, in the 15th century, a new force rose, a power hungry to claim what remained. Sultan Mehmed II, young and ruthless, saw not just a city, but the very heart of an old world. Urbana, he brought forth engines of war never before seen, a final, crushing blow for a dying dream. From glorious ruins to defiant walls to an overwhelming force, the grand stage was now set. What if everything you knew about Rome's fall was only half the story? My friend, join us as we uncover the 1,000-year death of an empire and its one final, brutal gasp. From afar, she still held a certain majesty, a fragile ghost of her former, glittering self. Yet, the golden light of her prime had long since begun to dim, fading slowly into twilight. This was once the world's radiant heart, a beacon of light, pulsing with civilization's grandest dreams. Here, knowledge flourished like ancient olive trees, their roots deep in wisdom, reaching for the heavens. The hum of culture, the symphony of ideas, once filled these very stones with boundless life. And power, oh, it flowed like a river through these gates, shaping destinies far and wide. But time, relentless and patient, always seeks its due, eroding even the proudest of monuments. This grand city, once so vibrant, felt more like a decaying shadow, a whisper of past glories. The rich flow of commerce, which once nourished her, had dwindled to a mere trickle. Alas, a quiet melancholy settled over her, like dusk settling upon a weary traveler's old homestead. Yet, standing defiant against time's tide, were her venerable, legendary Theodosian walls. They stood eternal, they rose like silent giants from the earth, a testament to an age when giants truly walked. For 1,000 years, they had been the city's shield, her unbreakable promise against a wild world. Generations had trusted these stones, believing them an eternal guardian of their sacred, cherished home. Each stone whispered tales of sieges repelled, of emperors, and of an empire's indomitable spirit. Now, these very walls represented her last defiant stand, her desperate, fading breath against inevitable fate. They were a stark, formidable symbol of an empire, mighty still, but undeniably, tragically fading. Within their embrace, the vibrant pulse that once nourished her had become a tired, slow beat. The world outside still roared, relentless, hungry, circling like wolves around a weary lamb. Imagine, if you will, the bustling markets, the vibrant silks, the echoes of countless happy voices. Now, only a few weary souls stood guard, their numbers few, their hopes threadbare, clinging on. Listen closely. Almost hear ghosts of laughter, lamentations, carried now softly on the old wind. Every cobble, every brick, held stories untold, heavy with the sheer weight of so much history. There was a palpable unease, a tension that clung to the air, like the coming storm. The threat lingered, a dark cloud, a wolf's shadow at the city's very ancient gates. She was a grand old dame, teetering now on the very precipice of an unimaginable, dark abyss. 1,000 years of empire, of dreams and despair, rested heavily upon her ancient, weary shoulders. One couldn't help but wonder if her time, after all these centuries, had finally come to end. A hushed stillness, a breath held tight, anticipating the inevitable roar of approaching, violent change. Constantinople, the fading jewel, awaited her fate, her mighty walls her last, defiant, silent plea. Here, where the echoes of empires linger, our story finds its heart, heavy with a sunset's glow. We journey back to a time when two formidable souls stood on the brink of an irreversible destiny. Their lives, their dreams, were bound irrevocably to this city's fate, a heavy, shared burden. Meet Constantine XI Palaiologos, the very last Roman emperor, a title heavier than any crown. He inherited a legacy stretching 1,000 years, now a fading whisper in a storm's roar. His empire, once vast, had shrunk to merely this city, a lonely isle in a rising tide. An impossible burden, truly. Yet, within him burned a resolute spirit, a Roman's unyielding fire. He knew his task was perhaps doomed, but retreat was not in his imperial, ancient blood. He was a shepherd to a dwindling flock, watching over a flickering flame in a growing darkness. Constantine carried the weight of a dying sun, obligated to protect its fading warmth till the end. He defended not just stones and walls, but a way of life, a memory of Roman glory. This gentle soul, burdened by history, prepared himself for a stand that would echo through ages. His courage, a quiet, steadfast beacon, shone brightest as the final, desperate hours approached. Across the narrow straits, a different kind of fire burned. Sultan Mehmed II, young and ravenous, ambitious, ruthless, and brilliantly strategic, he harbored a singular, consuming, audacious vision. From his youth, this was his dream: to claim the queen of cities, Constantinople itself. His Ottoman Empire, a burgeoning force, was rapidly asserting its dominance, its power undeniable. He was a force of nature, driven by an unyielding will, a destiny he actively forged. No obstacle, no wall, however ancient, would deter his singular, relentless, conquering intent now. Mehmed saw not just a city, but a symbol, a prize that would elevate his empire truly. His mind, keen and sharp, was fixed upon this one, glorious, ultimate conquest with unwavering focus. He felt the weight of history, yes, but as a challenge to overcome, a new era to begin. The Sultan, a young titan, was poised to strike, ready to carve his name into eternity. This wasn't merely a battle for a city, it was for the last beating heart of Rome, a pivotal symbol of Christendom, now an island in a vast, surging, Muslim empire's sea. The last living vestige of an empire that once spanned continents, now clung precariously to existence. A profound cultural and historical clash, centuries in the making, now finally stood at the precipice. Two men, two worlds, two destinies inexorably linked, on a collision course with history. The stage was set, the players in place, for a struggle that would reshape the very world. The stakes were immense, the legacy immeasurable, as the old world prepared its final breath. A new sun rose over the Ottoman lands, bringing with it a young sultan, Mehmed, and an unshakable will. He inherited a throne, yes, but also a profound, ancient dream, passed down through generations of sultans. Constantinople, a silent challenge, shimmered across the water, an old wound in the heart of his empire. For Mehmed, the time for contemplation was over. The time for decisive, undeniable action had finally arrived. The declaration, though unspoken publicly, resonated in the very air, a solemn promise to himself. His intent was clear, sharp as a winter's blade. Constantinople would be his, no matter the cost. This narrow strait, the Bosphorus, was the city's very lifeblood, its gateway to the wider world. For centuries, vessels moved freely, bringing sustenance, hope, and connection to the dwindling empire within. But Mehmed saw not passage, but a choke point, a vulnerability he was determined to exploit fully. His plan was audacious, a physical manifestation of his relentless, unyielding ambition for conquest. On the European side of the Bosphorus, where the current ran strong, his master plan began. Here, a colossal fortress would rise, a testament to Ottoman engineering and Mehmed's iron will. It was designed not merely to defend, but to sever, to physically cut off the city's vital lifeline. Thousands of hands, driven by Mehmed's relentless urgency, toiled ceaselessly, day and night, without rest. Mountains of stone were quarried, shaped, and lifted, each block a defiant challenge to the old world. The walls rose with astonishing speed, a silent, menacing promise etched into the very landscape itself. This wasn't just a castle, it was a declaration, a physical ultimatum carved in stone for all to see. From its battlements, cannons would command the narrowest point, making passage impossible for any vessel. No grain, no timber, no aid from the Black Sea could now reach the besieged capital. The lifeblood of Constantinople, once flowing freely, would now be inexorably squeezed, slowly, agonizingly. The city, once the heart of empires, would feel the tightening grip of hunger, of desperate isolation. They gave it a name that chilled the bones, Rumeli Hisara, meaning the throat-cutter fortress, a name not subtle, but brutally honest, describing its exact, terrifying function with stark clarity. From the ancient walls of Constantinople, the citizens watched, fear blooming in their anxious hearts. They saw not just stone and mortar, but the relentless, unyielding spirit of a conqueror embodied. Emperor Constantine, aware of the gravity, knew this was no mere skirmish, no idle threat. With the older fortress opposite, the Bosphorus was now effectively sealed, a deadly trap sprung. The roar of cannons would soon replace the gentle lapping of waves, announcing an end to peace. Rumeli Hisari stood complete, a dark sentinel guarding the passage, heralding an era's violent close. It was Mehmed's tangible promise, his audacious statement. The siege was no longer a question. The shadows lengthening from its walls now stretched across the Bosphorus, touching the city's defenses. He had engineered not just a fortress, but a chokehold, a physical manifestation of his deep ambition. The calm of the strait was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a strategic choke point. For Constantinople, the flow of vital supplies from the Black Sea had finally, irrevocably ceased. Isolation settled like a heavy cloak over the city, slowly suffocating its last desperate hopes. The city's lifeline was cut, its ancient heart now exposed, vulnerable, and deeply, terribly alone. There was no turning back now. The point of no return had been physically, irrevocably established. The stage was set, the players assembled. The final, tragic act was now poised to unfold. Mehmed's ambition was undeniable, his power manifest in every stone of his mighty fortress. This wasn't just a threat, it was the first, devastating physical blow, marking the beginning of the end. The air itself grew heavy with the unspoken promise of war, a dreadful, inevitable weight. The siege was no longer an abstract idea. It was a very real, terrifying, and imminent certainty. The old Roman dream, still flickering, faced its most formidable challenger, its final desperate hour approaching. And so, with a fortress forged of intent, Mehmed declared his unshakable will. The end was truly nigh. The weight of an empire, crumbling, rests heavy on one man's weary shoulders tonight. Letters, urgent pleas, were sent across seas, hopeful whispers into the vast silence. Each vessel carried a piece of his heart, a desperate cry for brotherhood, for help. But in distant halls of power, other games were played. Byzantium seemed a forgotten echo. He walked alone, a ghost of an empire, seeking allies where only shadows remained. Promises came, sometimes, laden with demands that tasted bitter, almost impossible to bear. The distance felt not just in miles, but in hearts that had grown so very cold. The silence that followed was louder than any battle cry, a crushing, profound abandonment. A few brave souls did come, a trickle against the coming tide, loyal to shared pasts. He greeted them with a weary smile, knowing their courage, but sensing inevitable loneliness. The city, once the world's heart, now stood at its very edge, profoundly alone. A mosaic of brave souls, from many lands, united by crumbling stone, a final hope. Their weapons were few, their armor piecemeal, but their spirit, unyielding, shone bright. They knew the odds, deeply felt the shadow approaching, yet stood firm, side by side. Faith, an ancient, flickering flame, offered solace in the face of such overwhelming despair. Behind the walls, anxious whispers, prayers for miracles, clung to every passing moment. Every stone, every plank, became a testament to their desperate, magnificent determination to hold. Ancient secrets, fiery breaths, prepared to guard their hallowed ground against the coming storm. Their emperor walked among them, not as a king, but as a brother in this final, shared fight. The mighty walls, scarred by time, now seemed to embrace a city holding its breath. In the hushed moments before the storm, a profound quiet settled, filled with solemn purpose. Each sunset brought the inevitable closer, yet painted the sky with a defiant, beautiful hope. Across the narrow straits, a different kind of dawn broke. A colossal, burgeoning shadow. Young Mehmed, an architect of empire, dreamed of conquests, a new world, his legacy. From every corner of his growing dominion, warriors converged, an ocean of disciplined might. The elite janissaries, disciplined and fearless, were the sharp edge of his formidable will. A marvel of logistics, supplies flowed endlessly, fueling this monumental undertaking, this siege. Along the shores, a new fleet blossomed, preparing to choke the city from the sea. His voice, clear and resonant, promised glory, a future etched in the very stones of Byzantium. Brilliant minds, driven by ambition, crafted machines of war, designed for unprecedented destruction. Banners, proud and numerous, unfurled across the plains, proclaiming an undeniable, coming power. The distant thrum of drums, the mournful call of trumpets, echoed, a prelude to conflict. An overwhelming human tide gathered, poised to break against the ancient, defiant, lonely walls. Deep within the Ottoman lands, a monstrous heart of iron began to take its fearsome shape. Urbana, they called it, a super cannon, whispered to be capable of shattering ancient legends. Its journey was an epic in itself, dragged by sheer will, a testament to human ingenuity. Through mud and forest, over hills, engineers charted its colossal, slow, inevitable path. At last, it stood before the legendary walls, a silent, terrifying harbinger of the city's doom. A chill went through the defenders, seeing this metal beast, this undeniable force of destiny. Fear mingled with a fierce resolve. They knew this moment, this ultimate trial, had come. Mehmed watched, his ambition now tangible, standing at the precipice of his grandest, terrible dream. The giant cannon was loaded, a deep breath taken by an entire empire, ready to unleash. Two worlds now stood in stark opposition, an unstoppable will against an unyielding, ancient heart. The silence was heavy, pregnant with fate, as history held its breath for what was to come. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, a quiet before the storm. Hope felt fragile then. They knew what was coming, a thunderous symphony of destruction. Their hearts ached, but resolve held. Then the first roar broke the dawn's silence, a sound that shook the very earth itself. The walls, once symbols of eternal strength, now began to weep stone and dust, a hard truth. Each strike was a blow to their spirit, a relentless rhythm of encroaching doom. No respite, yet courage flickered, refusing to be extinguished. Small groups sallied forth, defiant in the face. For a moment, they pushed back, a fierce, desperate surge against overwhelming odds. A fleeting victory. Such moments were brief, costly, but vital. They reminded them what they fought for, so bravely. A momentary reprieve, a flicker of hope in the deepening gloom. But the cost was always dear. But the enemy's numbers were an ocean, relentless waves against a lonely, crumbling shore. Dread lingered. Beyond the physical battle, a psychological war raged. Drums beat, a relentless, haunting pulse. Each beat was meant to chip away at their souls, to whisper doubts into their tired, brave hearts. Yet, the Byzantines answered with hymns, with bells, with a faith that refused to yield. And then there was the Golden Horn, their great chain, a defiant, shimmering line of hope. Behind it, their precious ships rested, safe, shielded from the Ottoman fleet. A small comfort, but Sultan Mehmed was not a man to be deterred by chains. His mind raced, cunningly. He saw not an obstacle, but a challenge, an invitation to a truly impossible feat. Under the cloak of darkness, a plan began to unfold. A secret whispered amongst the few. They cleared a path, through hills and trees, a route where no ship had ever dared. And then, the impossible. Ships, mighty vessels, began to move. Not on water, but over land they went, pulled by sweat and sheer force of will, defying gravity. It was a spectacle, silent and surreal. Ships sailing across land, a ghost fleet emerging. Each foot gained was a triumph of engineering and human endurance, a testament to ambition. Through the night, the impossible became real, a silent, creeping invasion from an unexpected quarter. Then, one by one, they slipped into the tranquil waters, bypassing the chain, unseen. Morning brought a horrifying sight. An Ottoman fleet, already within the Golden Horn, an impossible betrayal. Their safe haven was breached, their clever defense rendered utterly useless by sheer audacious will. Disbelief turned to dread. The city, already besieged, now faced an enemy from within its own sanctuary. The Golden Horn, once a symbol of safety, now thundered with Ottoman cannon fire. Panic rippled through the city. The unthinkable had happened. Hope's fragile thread began fraying. Outside, the relentless pounding of the Theodosian walls continued, a brutal, unending symphony of destruction. Where once stone stood mighty, now cracks appeared, like veins of impending doom, spreading slowly. The air was thick with dust and despair, a constant reminder of the city's slow, agonizing demise. Desperate hands tried to mend the wounds, but the sheer force of the onslaught proved too great. The defenders' eyes, once burning with defiance, now held only the dull ache of profound exhaustion. Morale, once a stubborn flame, now dwindled to a fragile, flickering ember against the encroaching dark. The weight of time pressed down, a heavy shroud upon a city that had stood for so long. Even the emperor, their brave leader, carried the immense burden of a collapsing world. So heavy. Their sacred symbols, once anchors of faith, now lay shattered, echoing the city's breaking heart. The relentless assault intensified, each cannon blast a hammer blow, striking at Constantinople's very core. The sun set on a broken city, its majestic walls now whispering tales of impending, irreversible doom. A cold, creeping desperation settled over them, a realization that time had truly, finally run out. They looked towards the horizon, knowing the dawn would bring not light, but a final, somber reckoning. The ancient city, once a beacon, now held its breath, awaiting an end that felt both inevitable and profound. A chilling dawn broke over Constantinople, silent for a breath before the storm truly broke loose. Then, a distant rumble, a tremor felt not just in the earth, but deep within the soul. The air filled with 1,000 voices, a primal, fearsome scream that promised only utter destruction. Cannons thundered, each shot a giant's hammer blow, splintering hope along with the ancient stones. The drums began a rhythm of dread, shaking the very foundations of the old world now. And then, the horrible, relentless clash of steel, a symphony of endings playing out. Wave after wave they came, a relentless human tide crashing against walls already crumbling down. Our weary defenders, ghosts of their former selves, fought with a courage born of pure desperation. The breaches groaned, opening wider with each assault, threatening to swallow our very existence. Such close, brutal fighting, where every swing and parry decided a life's swift, final chapter. Even as hope faded, our Byzantines stood tall, their bravery a final, burning ember in the darkness. And those brave Genoese, they fought not for empire, but for shared humanity, a true brotherhood. Then came the ultimate breach, a silent horror that unfolded as the gate gave way. Like a river breaking its banks, the enemy poured in, an unstoppable tide engulfing everything. Panic, a terrible cold fire, spread through the streets, engulfing all in its desperate, final grasp. High on the walls, Constantine gazed upon the unfolding, irreversible tragedy of his beloved city. In his eyes, no surrender, only a quiet, profound resolve to meet his destiny now. He shed his purple, the symbols of empire, becoming simply a man, a warrior. His sword, a trusted companion, was now his only truth in this desperate, final hour. Then, with a final cry, he charged, a lone star burning brightest at the very end. He vanished into the maelstrom, lost amidst the clash, fulfilling a king's solemn, final vow. His end, a whisper in the storm, a sacrifice offered to a city's dying light, and then a silence descended, heavier than any sound, as the last Roman emperor fell. Then the walls broke. A storm of steel and raw fury burst upon the city, silencing every hope. The gates, so long defended, now lay splintered. Invaders poured into streets that had known peace for centuries. Screams filled the air where hymns once rose. Desperate citizens ran, seeking refuge, finding only endless terror. Homes, once sanctuaries, were ransacked. Generations of cherished memories, now carelessly scattered, utterly broken. Even sacred ground offered no solace. Churches, once beacons of faith, echoed with the invaders' crude laughter. Such despair etched itself onto every face. A city's soul, once vibrant, now felt utterly crushed beneath a heavy boot. The struggle was fleeting, uneven. Pockets of resistance quickly faded, leaving only the silence of defeat. Fires began to bloom, swallowing homes and history. The sky itself seemed to weep ash. Centuries of beauty, of meticulous craft, simply torn asunder. The very fabric of the city was rending. Amidst the horror, small tragedies unfolded. Families torn apart, futures snatched away like a whisper in the storm. To Hagia Sophia, they fled. A sanctuary, a mother's embrace, seemed their only remaining haven. But even its holy doors could not hold. The sanctuary, too, was breached, its sacred peace shattered. The ancient echoes of prayer gave way to brutal shouts. A holy space witnessed unspeakable acts. Then, a different silence, not of peace, but of profound loss, marking an irreversible change. Through the ruined gates rode Sultan Mehmed. A conqueror surveys his prize, a new chapter beginning. He saw devastation, yes, but also a destiny fulfilled. The weight of empires resting upon his shoulders. His gaze swept over what was once Byzantium. Now, it was truly his, a monumental victory. A moment of quiet triumph amidst the ruins. The long, arduous struggle had finally ended. Before Hagia Sophia, he dismounted. A monument to one faith, about to embrace another. He stepped inside its vastness, the air heavy with history, awaiting a profound transformation. There, he knelt, in solemn prayer. A new era, a new faith, now claimed this sacred space. As dusk descended, the city held its breath. The storm had passed, leaving only a haunting quiet. A profound silence settled, heavy with finality. An empire had truly died, its echoes fading into night. And so, friends, we close a chapter, reflecting on echoes of a bygone world. A profound story indeed. The fall of Constantinople, on the 29th of May, 1453, was not merely an event. It was a true ending. Over 2 millennia after its founding, Rome finally breathed its last. A quiet, yet thunderous farewell. It wasn't just a city that crumbled that day. It was a vast, enduring civilization that perished. Constantinople, reborn as Istanbul, rose gloriously from the ashes. A new empire's radiant, magnificent capital. Mehmed's vision created a formidable new power. The Ottoman Empire now stood as a global titan. Across Europe, a palpable fear settled. Old certainties shattered. New threats loomed large. The closure of ancient trade routes spurred a frantic, ambitious search for new horizons. The world shifted. Fleeing scholars carried precious knowledge westward, igniting the European Renaissance with fresh ideas. The Ottoman Empire's ascent was now undeniable, establishing its lasting mark on the world stage. We see the unyielding human spirit, the soaring ambition of empires. Yet, nothing lasts forever. Even the greatest civilizations, like friends, must eventually fade. A poignant, brutal truth of history. History is rarely neat. Some deaths are long, drawn-out goodbyes. But finality always comes. If you felt this epic story, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts on other final stands.